Unmuted by host. Okay.
Hello.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Great.
Okay, great.
Great. So that's all we need, right? For to set up.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I want to say start my video?
Sure, then I can see you and you can see me.
Great. Okay. Start my video. Sorry, I haven't done this. Hi there.
All right. Hi.
Hey, do you want me to start reading immediately or?
No, we're still in
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
It's going to be a minute or two because the other show ended a little early.
Okay, that's cool. I'm sorry.
Can you hear the show?
What, darling? What?
Can you hear the radio?
I hear the radio.
Okay, great.
I hear it. Now I got you.
Such low sound.
Use the hair. I haven't had a haircut in a while.
Oh, well, who has? I don't know when I'm getting one. I have no idea. Nothing's opening here. Hey. Oops. Okay, I'm turning the sound up a little.
All right. You are listening to Right on Radio on KFAI 90.3 FM and streaming live on the web at kfai.org. I'm Josh Weber, and tonight on Right on Radio, Liz Olds talks with Susan Priver about her memoir, Dancer Interrupted. What happens when our dreams of becoming a professional athlete, singer, writer become impossible? For Susan Priver, a gifted ballerina, she believed it was the end of her life. She began her career as a ballet dancer and trained under George Benching at the School of American Ballet in New York City. Susan has built an extensive resume of dramatic and comedic roles in a variety of contemporary and classic plays on a number of LA stages. Additionally, Susan is a beloved yoga teacher in Pasadena, California. For the last part of our show, I'll be talking with Cody Cassidy about his latest work, Who Ate the First Oyster? The extraordinary people behind the greatest verse in history. Who wore the first pants? Who first rode the horse? Who invented soap? This madcap adventure across ancient history uses everything from modern genetics to archaeology to uncover the geniuses behind these and other world-changing innovations. Cody Cassidy is a freelance writer living in San Francisco who spends his time playing ultimate frisbee and surfing. All this and more, so stay tuned to Right on Radio.
You ready?
Yes, I'm ready for your reading.
Okay.
Susan.
All right. Hello, everyone.
All right. I should have known that my arrival home wasn't going to be well received. Dad had been pretty firm about that on the phone a few weeks earlier. And yet, there he was, waiting impatiently in the arrival area of LAX, wearing his oil-stained work outside in the garage clothes, with cigarette smoke wafting from his carved ivory cigarette holder. I imagined that he would come to the airport dressed in one of his beautiful suits he wore to his law office. I imagined there would be some compassion in his expression and in the tone of his voice. I was wrong. "Grab your bags, let's get to the car," he said gruffly, as I reached for my heavy luggage coming around the baggage carousel. He grabbed one for me, but I could feel his agitation at having to drive all the way to LAX as we walked quickly to his vintage Porsche. The cigarette holder dangled from his mouth as he loaded my bags into the trunk. On the 405 freeway, I stared out the front window, contemplating my next move. I loved the change of seasons on the East Coast, and here I was, back in the LA heat and smog. The drive home to the San Fernando Valley seemed endless. Dad barely said a word. We approached our respectably small house on Placidia Avenue, built in 1936. It was just down the street from comedian Bob Hope's enclave, which took up an entire city block. Dad opened the wrought iron gate and got back in the car, and as we drove up the long driveway, fear engulfed me. Mom had finished her shift at Children's Hospital and was sitting on the couch in the den waiting for us when we walked in the house. Getting up to greet us, she looked tired and a bit haggard. Her gray hair was untouched and her face was free of makeup, but she seemed happy to see me. "We're going to take care of you," she said softly with some true compassion. I fell into her arms, and the tears that I'd been holding back since I was fired from my dream job in Cleveland fell onto her white nurse's uniform. She was going to make it okay for me to recover. She'd done it before and was particularly good at it. I gave up a part of my childhood to become a dancer, and I missed out on knowing who I was, without the mirrors, the stage, and the deep connection to music that made everything else bearable. Now, Mom, who'd begged me in the last few years to go to college, would save me from this devastating fall from grace. Just her hug made me believe I was loved. Now I could let go and completely fall apart. She would be there to save me. I knew she loved me, especially when I couldn't take care of myself.
That's Susan Priver with a reading from Dancer Interrupted, her book about many things, actually. Why don't you give us the brief overview of the book?
A brief overview? Well, I start out basically still employed in my very last job, and basically talk about how deeply it affects me to finally wear a tiara, because it takes a long time to wear a tiara in the ballet world.
To get to the tiara point, yeah.
Yes, so I use the tiara a little bit of a symbol, as when and in the second chapter I'm fired, and I talk about how I've come home and how I basically have lost my complete self. I come home because there's nowhere else for me to go, except I do go to New York for a while, and I'm having problems in New York because the wrong men are trying to take me out. Very scary men, because I'm very vulnerable, not without my identity. And most dancers audition for another company when they're fired. I personally went into a very deep depression. And the deep depression didn't allow me to sort of stand up for myself. And so my only place to go was home, thinking that would be a place to solve my angst. I went home and it got a lot worse. And I did not leave my parents' couch, I hate to say this, for 8 months. I got up to go to the bathroom. I took a few showers because my mother forced me to. And I learned what it was to lose self. I learned what it was to, and I think a lot of people can relate to losing their job, losing maybe a writer's block for a writer, maybe someone who's a journalist. They just can't say the words anymore. Ballet was like writing a sentence for me. Ballet was like my full expression of my human experience, which was very young because I was only 24 when it all happened, when I fell completely. And so the story encompasses how my parents made me crazier than I already was, because they didn't believe that it was a quote unquote spiritual. I felt that it was kind of a spiritual death. But my need as a young person was to show them that I could be worthy without the tiara. And I didn't have one anymore. And I wasn't worthy anymore. And they made me feel it. And not because they were pushy parents, it was because they expected things of me. I was no idiot. I could have done something. I could have pulled myself up. They were like, get a job, you'll be fine. Go back to work. I went back to work. I mean, I never worked. I was a dancer. I had a couple, little jobs when I was out of work, but basically, you don't know the real world. And so the story encompasses breaking into the real world with a few different jobs, a few different personal encounters, because not knowing how to deal with regular human beings. I was used to backstage people, composers, dancers, musicians, and a lot of young people, but the older people told you what to do, told you what to say. So that it was, and I dug myself out. So that's what it encompasses. And then how I transferred my life into learning to have a voice. And that's the story, which a lot of women from that time, we're talking the 70s and 80s,
oh yeah,
maybe didn't have a voice, maybe did, but because I didn't go to college, my experience was as a vulnerable young woman out for the wolves. Just give me a dance job, I'm happy, I'm safe. And I was not safe anymore. So anyway, I encompassed those things and how my parents reacted not that well to my falling apart or not knowing what to do.
there seems to be in my three real distinct parts of the book. And the first one is about your life in the ballet.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't theater major, so I get it. But why don't you tell our listeners about that kind of wonderful and secret and occasionally unhealthy world of ballet and theater, and how you lived in that from the time you were like 14,
yes,
or 13, or even earlier than that?
Well, the world that I grew up in, even though I came from LA, I went to New York very young, and at School of American Ballet, if you didn't weigh 90 pounds, you were fat. So, and Balanchine, who was the greatest choreographer, artist of that time, for ballet anyway, liked his women that way. And so the competitiveness was not only about being good at what you did, it was about how skinny you could be. So the eating disorders were rampant. So flash forward, even when I'm 23 or 20 dancing for companies, it's not as bad, but it's still, you can't eat. And I wasn't a bulimic. So there is a competition also because you have to be youthful to dance. Your body gives out. By the time you're 35, you're probably done. Unless you go into modern dance, which some dancers do. But the competitiveness was not, it's very competitive, but I never related to it that way because I loved it so much. It was really just, what can I do? And maybe that was a failing. Because you kind of have to like move someone else over to make your place more seen. And that wasn't in my nature, necessarily being a little bit sensitive. So, and maybe a lot of dancers are like that, but I didn't have the support underneath me because my parents didn't come from theatrical. It wasn't a theatrical family. They didn't understand what I was doing. They knew I was going to never make any money. And it was never a money-making thing. I made a little bit in the companies I danced for, but it was really only enough to survive. Barely enough to survive.
It was the love of the thing.
Yes,
it was
and
the love of the thing.
Yes, and I mentioned in the beginning of the book that it's a calling. And the dancers are kind of like monks. They're so disciplined and they love what they do. Now, once you get older and your real personality starts to come in, some of those things start to leave you, and dancers can be a little bit wild because they've been so disciplined and so held down for so many years. So I experienced that when I stopped.
Talk about your injuries. I mean, I think of dance as an athlete. I think of dancers as athletes, and injuries, even kind of what would seem like minor injuries, can be career-threatening and sometimes even career-ending. And you had several. Why don't you talk about those?
I had a bad back injury early on, dancing in Chicago for a while, and when you're 20, you just keep going. You keep performing with pain. I didn't even collect workman's comp, which you can collect if you're injured. You just keep going because 20 is 20. Just like an athlete, you just keep going. You find a way to work around it. But it does affect you. I had some ankle stuff early on because everybody gets tendinitis. You're used to a certain amount of pain, and because there's so many endorphins when you are dancing on stage, you don't even feel it until you come off. So I got used to that pain being happiness, the freedom of space. And that may be something that athletes feel the same way, because it's just, you are at the height of your physical body. You're at the height of it if you've trained well, which most dancers do if you get to the point of being a professional dancer. I never was great enough to be the prima or maybe even the soloist, but I was getting there. But then mine was the mental instability that took me down. If I didn't have that, I may have gone on a little longer. I'm not sure. I might have. I don't know. But no regrets. You move on.
You got laid off the Cleveland Ballet and you decided not to audition again. Was that a hard decision, or was that kind of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do? Or how did you...
It wasn't a decision. It wasn't... That's a good question, because it wasn't literally a decision. It was when you get fired and you have no backbone as a human being, and you're young, which I was 28, just 24. I just turned 24, I think. I didn't have a solid base to go, somebody else will like me. I just went, they all will hate me. the depression was so bad. I mean, it was clinical depression. I mean, I could barely walk, let alone dance. So it just got progressively worse, and it really had to do with the depression more than anything. A person that is emotionally stable would have just gone, stayed in shape, and you go to audition, just like an athlete that gets left because they're not meant for this team. You're not right for our team. You go to another team because you're basically a team player. If you're in the corps de ballet, which I was, you got to stay in line and you play with the team. So I took it harder than I should have, but that's okay. There's no shoulds. I took it in a way that let me just fall down the rabbit hole. That's all.
Well, and that seems to me to be the second part of the book, is that deep, deep depression that you went into. You want to start by describing some of that, what it was like and what you were doing?
Well, once I got home to my parents, there was the wish that they'd say, it's going to be okay. And that wish did not come true. It was more like, get up, go do something. I don't care how sad you are. I don't care how depressed you are. You are I was healthy. I don't care how much weight you gain because all you do is sit around and eat. I mean, I kind of laid down. I barely sat up during the day. I mean, my depression was so deep that I couldn't get up. And occasionally I did, to have a cup of coffee or maybe sit with my parents, but all they'd talk about was what was wrong with me. So it became too self-involved. I just wanted to escape from that. And I sat and did crossword puzzles all day. I couldn't read and I love to read. I'm a huge reader. I wasn't ever a writer, but I was a reader. And I couldn't read because I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't focus. It was just, the depression was of that kind where it's suicidal. But I was too chicken to commit suicide. And so my health was going down. It affects your body, mind, spirit. I'm a yoga teacher now. They worked together very well. And I understand that when I teach as a yoga teacher, I'm very connected to people's sort of essence of what they feel inside. Just because of having, I think it played out, it colored my whole life because I understood falling that deep and not being able to think clearly, to feel anything. When you're in depression, you cut everything off. It's beyond sadness. I think most people know some version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it runs in my family. So I did inherit some of that. But my parents were like, that era was like, just get up and do something, you'll be fine. Plus we were all spoiled to some extent. The struggles were not monetary. We weren't rich, but it wasn't monetary struggle. But so that's it. And I did go to some therapy and I was on antidepressants briefly. And I said, no, that's not what it is. And I dug myself up. So I dug myself out of that.
Now, your mom and your dad kind of reacted differently to you. How did they react, and what's your feeling now about all of that?
Well, the feeling about it now is my dad, as harsh as God bless him, he died pretty young. He died at 59 because he was a big smoker. God bless him. He knew, he was very hard on me and not nice, but he knew that I needed to get up. He knew that I had to find a spine for myself. My mom, all she did was enable me. She got some thrill out of me being very weak and very vulnerable and very help me. What do I do? And so it was a complete battle between the two of them over me. And it was just way too much attention on a 24-year-old, way too much attention. And I had lived on my own since I was 17. So it was sort of like, I was a child. I became a child again. It was not comfortable at all. But I wanted them to finally say, oh, we'll help you. You'll be okay. We love you this way. We love you without your tutu and tiara. That never happened. Not that they loved me, but with the tutu and tiara either. And I think they did love me, but they just didn't know how to show it. That's all.
Right. And it seems like your mom was more, quote, codependent, and your dad was more, quote, tough love.
Tough love, yeah. I think he'd been through the Korean War, and I think those guys are so tough. They're hiding so many things. Who knows what they're hiding, you know? So
Yeah.
he, and that was never talked about. So who knows, you know, he had a pretty big position. I think he was a lieutenant, and he loved, even though he became a lawyer, he loved being in the Army. So he loved that discipline. He loved that, you know, control and blah, blah, blah. So who knows what his thing was. He was never going to be a soft, sensitive guy. That wasn't him. So
Now, eventually, after you tried the therapy and the meds and all that stuff, you came to a decision. It does sound like this was a decision where you were going to pull yourself up. You were kind of tired of being a lump on the couch, and you made this conscious thing that said, I don't know if these are the exact words, but it was kind of like, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do this, or I'm not going to make it.
yeah,
You know, somehow I'm going to have to get better.
I was going to
How did you
either,
come to that?
exactly right. I was going to either die or get better, because I couldn't live like that. I knew that. And so that shows that my whatever mental instability I had was still telling me, you are not insane. You're just really depressed. So I had some awareness that I was maybe doing this to myself. Maybe I was doing this to myself. I mean, there is a physical reaction. There was physical depression, mental depression, but maybe I had done a lot of it to myself. So,
Well, I think didn't one of the one person talk to you about how you had spent such a long time with all these endorphins in your body, and when you stopped moving, the endorphins kind of went away, and that's
yes.
a way to get depressed anyway.
Yeah, it was. And it was an early I went to a psychiatrist when I lost my first job at the Levski Ballet, and I didn't lose it. We were on a hiatus. And I wasn't fired from there, but I would go through depressions when I stopped dancing. Instead of just being in class and doing swimming or whatever, I just would get depressed, thinking I would never dance again. And it did affect my brain. The brain chemistry definitely was tied up to those endorphins. It definitely was. And not so much anymore. I've learned to cope. Whatever depression I get, I know it will go away. It's not forever. So then I didn't know, because I was young and naive, and I needed those endorphins so terribly.
Yeah,
You know? It's like a drug.
This too shall pass is a good thing.
Right. But athletes, I'm imagining dancer is like an athlete. Athletes must go through the same thing, because you're playing for so long at a really heightened physicality.
Yeah.
And then you stop, and you feel really good after for a while. You stop too long, where's your high? You know, because I was never a drug person. That never happened. I had the drug. I had the endorphins. They're fab. And now listen, a lot of people like to work out, and it does help. It does help mental health. It does. So, but for someone who's obsessed with a sport or an art like that, it's more like obsession than just going to the gym. It's real obsession, because there's a perfectionism that comes with it, and it's really sad, very sad.
Yeah.
The perfectionism that comes with it, very hard on young people, but you buy right into it, you know.
Yeah. And then the third part of the book, and this is a little bit more nebulous, but it becomes very clear as you read that after you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, supposedly, or you did what you needed to do to
survive,
relieve yourself of to survive. Yeah, you very gradually get better. You get a job. You meet some people. You go to work, and then at some point you decide that you want to become an actor or actress, or however you.
It's fine. Actress. It's fine.
Actress is fine. And it's interesting because when you were leaving the Cleveland Ballet, what was his name? Dennis
Nahat, yeah.
You could act. He gave you a letter of recommendation to some Broadway producers, but actually at that time it seems like you felt it was an insult.
I did at the time.
Doing it.
I did at the time. Yes, I did.
How did you make that change in your brain over that course of however many years it was?
I always felt more alive on the stage. And I had been introduced to some great writing by by a friend of mine who was an actor.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered the vulnerability of some of the characters and what I had experienced myself as kind of a vulnerable young woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, let me see if I can find a voice in this. I didn't know. I had been encouraged by a couple of people. I didn't know, and I wasn't very good at first because you're so used to expressing with your arms and your legs and your feet and your head turning a certain way. And acting is much more contained and much more psychological. And dance is much more, it's not completely primal, but I think it's more primal. That's why you see little kids dancing a lot or singing a lot. So I took it as a challenge, and I like challenges and I like process. So it was a long process for me because I had no voice whatsoever except to take food orders. And I talk about that in the book because I was a waitress for a while, and I did learn to be a little tough, sort of tough, just so I could be a waitress and make my living that way. But there was a part of me that wanted to find the soul of the dancer that I was. And in some writing, I felt that. It didn't mean I could execute it. It took me a long time. But I wanted to find that deep part of myself that was expression of truth or expression of something bigger than myself, that was unanimous or universal. And you can only find that in the great, great writers. And then, et cetera, et cetera. So I was drawn to some of this great writing and trying to figure out how words could be as deep as a développé or just a grand jeté, or moving across the stage in a way where you feel free. So that's kind of what it became for me. How am I going to find this?
And it sounds like you went to a wonderful school. Was it called the Law?
It was called the Loft, and Peggy Fury had run that, and she had passed away, and her husband took over, Bill Traylor, and both of his daughters were wonderful actresses. But I had heard about it through the grapevine, and I felt at home there. And we worked really hard, and Bill really liked me. And so that was nice. I felt a connection with someone, and then he died like 2 months later.
What a drag.
It was a drag. But I had learned, you don't let this, you just keep going. But he'd given me some support, like this might be right for you. And I was already 27. I was not young. I had gone through so much to just make a living, try to find a school, not live with my parents because I didn't want to, just make a living and take care of myself and find a way to learn this craft that was late to me. It was late, even though I'd been on the stage a lot. It's very different. It's very different than dancing. Very different.
It sounds like you had a lot of roles, but the big one was Blanche Dubois. Is that the one that kind of set your mind that this is really what I'm going to do?
Oh, no. Blanche Dubois, I just played last year.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm sorry.
I played it older, yeah. I mean, because stage, you can't tell people's age from stage. I played, Pinter really got me. I love Harold Pinter.
Okay.
I did a good Tennessee Williams, Kingdom of Earth, which not a lot of people have seen. It's a great play. I mean, some people don't think it's his greatest play, but that got me ready for Blanche, even though, I'm doing this so much later in my life. But I did do some great roles before that, but nothing speaks to me like Tennessee Williams.
Yeah.
Nothing speaks to me like that.
Well, we're almost out of time. I just want to thank you. We've been speaking with Susan Priver, author of Dancer Interrupted. It's a great book, and as much as we've talked about in this half an hour, there's much more that could be talked about. So I highly recommend reading it. How do people get a hold of you? What's next for you?
Well, what's next? I'll have a couple more radio things, or podcasts. One in Portland is a TV thing, but a couple of things, nothing big, but some things. Hopefully I'll get the word out. My website, you can buy the book off my website if you want. It's connected to Amazon, is www.susanpriver.com. Okay. And so you can get it from there if you want. And a couple more. I have a book signing here in Los Angeles with a writer who's a student of mine, actually. So just carrying on. Hopefully I'll be able to get it out there because it could be helpful for some people.
Keep it going. It certainly has a message. It certainly has a message about what, not just the discipline and learning of art, but also what to do about depression when you're depressed. I mean, it's a big
Big
thing.
issue. Yeah, big issue for so many. So,
Yes, it is. Well, we're out of time.
It's okay.
I'm sorry that we're out of time, but thank you so much
oh,
for
thank you.
the interview. Susan Priver,
Priver.
author of Dancer. Priver?
It's Priver with a more long E. Yes, it's okay. It's okay. I thank you, though. Thank you for the interview. Great talking to you.
It's been wonderful. And so thank you very much, and we will bid you adieu.
I'll bid you adieu. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hope I figure out how to turn this off. Okay. Stop. Do I stop chat? What am I doing? Okay, got it. The meeting has been ended. Okay. Update available. Okay, I did it. I did it.
You were great.
Was I?